Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a beautiful Canadian spring day. I'm Edmund, president of White Hearts. Thanks for joining us for this Dewey, Diva, and Dude exclusive presentation. We are always happy to join forces with our friends, the Dewey, Diva, and Dudes, a group of publisher sales reps passionate about literacy and libraries. Today, they're going to inspire us with a collection of special adult books that allow us to escape. We're going to have Rosalyn, Steele, HarperCollins, Tim Gain, Canadian Manda Group, Laureen, Cusack, Ampersand, and Andrea, Colquhoun, Penguin Random House. Without further ado, I think I'm correct in saying, Rosalyn, you are probably first up.
I am. Can you hear me okay? Hello, thanks so much for tuning into this webinar. Whether you are in dire need of a vacation in an exotic locale or just need a book that sucks you in and allows you to take your mind off your worries of the day, there is definitely a book on our summer list that fits the bill. The first up is The Librarian's Spy, a novel of World War II by Madeline Martin. One of my favorite episodes of Doctor Who is a battle scene that takes place in a library, and he's famously quoted as saying, "We're in a library, books are the best weapons in the world." So it only makes sense that those who curate and keep books are the ones who can save the world, be it from censorship or misinformation, or more literally. Kate Quinn's Diamond Eye, which you can see on the bottom part of the screen, just came out last week and was inspired by a true story. It's about a Ukrainian library worker who becomes one of the top snipers in the Russian army during the Second World War. The Librarian's Spy was also inspired by the true story of American librarians who became spies in the neutral cities of Europe during World War II. The novel follows Ava, who is asked to leave her job in the Library of Congress in 1940 by the US military and pose as a librarian in Lisbon, Portugal, in order to gather intelligence information. She's communicating with Elaine, who is working with the resistance in Lyon, France, at an underground printing press. The role of librarians working in intelligence gathering during the Second World War has only previously been covered in nonfiction. Madeline Martin, whose previous book, The Last Bookshop in London, spent weeks on the bestseller list, knows how to craft a story that will keep you riveted and also packs an emotional punch. Next up is Dead Man's Grave. One of my guilty pleasures when I need an escape are mysteries. So Dead Man's Grave by Neil Lancaster, I read in about 3 hours. And my tagline for this book is Tartan Noir meets Jack Reacher. It's the first book of a stunning new Scottish crime series, perfect for fans of Stuart McBride, Ian Rankin, and Lee Child. It came out last year in the UK, where it was longlisted for the 2021 McIlvenney Prize for Scottish Crime Book of the Year. The author is an ex-detective and military policeman who uses his firsthand experience to bring authenticity to his stories. The main character in this book is DS Max Craigie, who is Scottish by birth, but has just returned to work in Glasgow after stints in the military and with the police in London, in England. His first case involves the disappearance of a local gangster who is, no spoilers, he's found murdered quite early in the book. He's stabbed by an antique sword and left in an abandoned graveyard. The culprit is quickly apprehended, but that is just the beginning. The death has to do with an old vendetta between two families going back over a century, and the gangster's family has vowed to kill every member of the other family in revenge. Time is ticking as D.S. Craigie and his partner have to stop the murder spree, which proves difficult as the killers seem to have a mole in the police force. The book is packed with action, twists, and turns, and really engaging characters. Since we picked up the rights rather late on the series, the e-audio and ebook are already available. We're publishing the print book in May, and the second book, which is called The Blood Tide, will follow in fall. So hopefully by book 3, we'll all be caught up in the UK publication schedule. So if you love a good Scottish mystery, do give this a go. It's unputdownable. Next up is A Spoonful of Murder by J.M. Hall. This next book is perfect for fans of the Thursday Murder Club. It's a cozy murder mystery set in Yorkshire featuring 3 retired school teachers, Liz, Thelma, and Pat, who have to solve the murder of a former colleague, Topsy, who is suffering from dementia. And nobody took her seriously when she reported seeing something suspicious at her house. The police think she was confused and accidentally overdosed on her medications, but her friends think otherwise. She had recently been the victim of several fraud attempts, from builders doing unnecessary work at marked up prices to a con artist who swindled her out of her life savings after posing as a bank employee over the phone and convincing her to transfer her savings to a supposedly safe account. With nothing but their instincts to take to the police, the three women start digging into the fraud and the people in Topsy's life most likely to benefit from her death. With lots of red herrings, it is both a satisfying mystery and a book that touches upon issues such as elder care and financial exploitation of vulnerable individuals. Next is Are You Sarah by S.C. Lally. This is a Canadian author. She's from Saskatoon, now lives in Vancouver. And you might know her under her other name. She's published several romantic comedies with Berkeley under her real name, Sonia Lally. The Matchmaker's List, Holly Jolly Diwali, and Flip the Script. This is her thriller debut, and it is just the fresh, twisty, fast-paced read that you need to sweep you away. It's about two college students named, both are named Sarah. One is working at a pub and the other is a customer at a pub. And after the employee is asked to help the other one out of the washroom after too many drinks, they bond. And they end up spending some time together that evening. But at the end of the night, they both get into their respective rideshare cars and head home. Sarah, the bar employee, falls asleep. And when she wakes up, she's on the wrong side of town. She's in the very wealthy area. She doesn't have a lot of money, so she ends up walking back to her apartment, which is in a definitely more rough area. And she finds the other Sarah dead on her doorstep. They obviously got into the wrong car. Was it just a random attack that led to Sarah's death, or were one of them being targeted, and which woman was meant to be killed? The author expanded into thrillers because she wanted to add more diversity into the space. One of the characters is Indian American woman. So it's a really unputdownable thriller with some really great elements, and there's more to come. The US is really excited about this one, so we've signed her up for more thrillers. Next up is a couple of books that are take you away to exotic locales and also incorporate a little bit of a mystery. One of the Girls by Lucy Clark is our first book with Lucy. She previously was published by Simon & Schuster, and you might know her from her book, The Castaways. Her sun-soaked thrillers give her a little bit of an edge, and this is armchair travel at its very best. Her writing gets a lot of comparisons to Lucy Foley. This one has shades of The Holiday, and in a dark, dark wood, it transports you to the sun-drenched Greek island of, sorry, I can never remember the name. It is a made-up Greek island, but because she wanted to have some creative liberties. But it's where a group of female friends have gathered for the weekend to celebrate the upcoming wedding of Lexi and Ed. Along for the trip are childhood friends Robin and Bella, Bella's girlfriend Fen, and Eleanor, Ed's sister, as well as Anna, who's Lexi's new friend from her yoga class. As the weekend progresses, it becomes clear that several of the women are hiding secrets. Told in alternating points of view, the characters' backstories and motivations are gradually revealed. You know that something very bad is going to happen, so tension keeps you turning the pages, but the ending will definitely surprise. And Out of Her Depth is our second book with Lizzie Barber. I loved her first book, A Girl Named Anna. This one is great for fans of the talented Mr. Ripley. It's set in a sun-drenched Tuscan countryside villa over the course of a summer where a college student becomes embroiled in a group of privileged and manipulative young sophisticates. So it's what starts off with kind of the rich behaving badly, turns into toxic friendships, and ultimately culminates in murder. So it's a really great read, and you'll feel like you've gone to Tuscany. Next is The Change by Kristen Miller. I love this book so much. It's one of those books that I found myself fist pumping a lot during the read. It's so satisfying. It's funny, sharp, witty, and very, very timely. It's about three women who are all of the age where they're going through menopause, but they're also coming into their own and developing unexpected powers that at last make them unafraid to stand up for themselves and for other women. One of the women can channel her hot flashes into real heat that she can generate from her hands. One seems to be magically in tune with nature, and one is able to see the dead. And she asks the other two for help when it becomes apparent that someone in their wealthy beach community has been abusing and murdering young underprivileged women. The Change is a revenge fantasy for any woman who's ever been shoved off a corporate ladder, sexually harassed, grown up ashamed of her body, watched others take credit for her work, or lived in fear for a daughter's safety. It's both a murder mystery and a tale of female friendship and empowerment. It's funny, but also very serious. It's a huge, like, you'll rip through this. It's a great page turner. It's been optioned for a TV series by an Emmy nominated writer, and it's the author. This is her first adult book. She's the author of the YA series featuring a character called Kiki Strike. It's great for those who love a touch of magic in their fiction. And speaking of magic, we also have a book called The Women Could Fly by Megan Giddings. This is coming in August. Her first book, Lakewood, was got a lot of award buzz. It got 2 NAACP nominations and was a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize. This is set in a world where witches are real and the government closely monitors women as a result of their fear. If a woman isn't married by the age 28, she must register with the government to clear herself of suspicion. The main character is haunted by the disappearance of her mother when she was a teenager. And the story is told in a series of flashbacks between them and the present day. The book mixes a tale of witches with a unique mother-daughter relationship and piercing commentary on race and discrimination. It's a bit Jordan Peele, a bit Margaret Atwood, and I wasn't surprised to hear that this book has also been optioned for development as a TV series. I'm not sure, is someone not on mute? There's a lot of background, there's a bit of background noise. I just thought I'd mention that. The next up is A Dreadful Splendor by B.R. Myers. This is a Canadian author from PEI who now lives in Halifax. This is a lot of fun. It's about a young woman posing as a spiritualist, but she's now in jail awaiting execution for fraud for her crimes, and is approached by a person who promises to clear the charges against her if she comes to his estate to hold a fake seance to contact his fiancée, who he believes was murdered the day before their wedding. He is certain that the two of them can trick a confession out of the killer, but when she arrives, it seems like the ghosts in the grand house might be very real. So think Agatha Christie meets Bridgerton, sprinkled with a bit of Jane Eyre. It's a gothic murder mystery rom-com that combines a twisty whodunit with a witty historic Victorian drama and lots of romance. There's the broodingly handsome Mr. Pemberton and of course Genevieve, the con artist. They move from reluctant allies to love interests over the course of the book, and it really hits that sweet spot between lovable characters and a modern, irreverent sensibility that will remind you of Clue, Knives Out, or Enola Holmes. This is another adult debut from, adult debut from a YA author. She also publishes under the pseudonym Daphne Dubois. The embroidered book. So if historical fiction is more of how you like to escape into a book, this is combines a little bit of fantasy with with a really big historical novel. This is another Canadian author. Kate was based in Ottawa. She was born in Kitchener and grew up in Quebec. Her previous works include the Alice Payne series from Tor, as well as several books with Chizine, and she's been nominated for numerous genre awards. This book reimagines the Austro-Hungarian history with a bit of a magical twist, where two sisters, Antoinette and Charlotte, are both married off for political advantage by their mother, the Empress Maria Theresa, to men that they don't know. Their close friendship from childhood dissolves, morphing into a competition that sends the entire continent into a tailspin. It's gorgeously written researched historical fiction, comparable to Hilary Mantel. There's like pages and pages of characters, like a character breakdown at the start of the book. This is a big book. It's almost 800 pages, but it's full of wit and great characters. It looks at the power of women and how fragile it was for women to hold power at this time period. So a great mix of historical and fantasy. And if more straightforward history that shines is more of your escape, we have some great historical fiction coming up this summer. a lot of which involve women's stories. So The Last Queen, this is one that we picked up from Harper India. It's the story of the commoner who became the last reigning queen of India's Sikh empire. That's on the long list for the Dublin Literary Prize. The Falcon's Eyes is another huge book. It's again almost 800, or I think it's over 800 pages, but it's again unputdownable. It's about a young woman who's develops a friendship with Eleanor of Aquitaine after they meet in a convent. Isabel is introduced as a young, naive teenager who's married off to a powerful man, and you watch her grow into an independent woman who manages her life and her husband. Eventually escapes from his abuse, thanks largely to the example and friendship of the brave Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. So it's steeped in history and pageantry of the age, lots of hunting and falconry and daring do's. It's a perfect escape for people exhausted by the complications of modern times, or those who loved Maggie Farrell's Hamnet. Sister Mother Warrior is by Vanessa Riley, who you might remember from the novel Island Queen. This tells the story of the Haitian Revolution through the story of two incredible women, the first Empress of Haiti and Gran Toya, a West African-born warrior who helped lead the rebellion that drove out the French. So it offers a great insight into two fascinating women from history that I previously wasn't familiar with, two women of color who had been erased from the history books, who were both instrumental throughout the Haitian Revolution. The Thread Collectors, another big historical read. This one is set in the US Civil War, and it follows two characters, one who's a young Black woman named Stella who stitches maps to help enslaved men escape and join the Union Army, and then a Jewish woman named Lily who's searching for her husband who has gone missing on the battlefield. And they're both seamstresses who use their talents to help the Union cause. And who knew that sewing could be so thrilling and profoundly moving at the same time? In the novel, embroidery becomes a form of communication, self-expression, and safety that is beautifully rendered. Both of the characters in this book are inspired by ancestors of the two authors. And while Alice Finn Richmond is an established author, Shauna is this is her debut, and it's just beautifully done, and it's offers two perspectives and from marginalized characters who aren't really portrayed in Civil War fiction a lot. And then lastly, in my historical slide is Mystique Island. This is more contemporary history. It's set in the 1970s on Mystique Island, which was a sun-drenched island where the rich and fabulous used to vacation, including Princess Margaret. So it's set against the backdrop of a really heartfelt mother-daughter story, but there's lots of cameos from well-connected people. So that make this book a great read for anyone who loves The Crown. So just fantastic escapist reading set on an exclusive tropical island for the wealthy. Really great read. Next are two romances, because really nothing sweeps you away than a good love story. Bola Babalola, who has the best name, she is the author of a short story collection called Love and Color, which got a lot of love. Honey and Spice is about a young Black British woman with no interest in love who finds herself in a fake relationship. The writing really sets this apart, as does the characters. This one is a great one for book club, and again, will really transport you and put a smile on your face. And then A Proposal They Can't Refuse. This reminded me a lot of one of my favorite romances, The Hating Game, with a dash of My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It's so funny. It's about two characters whose two grandfathers are best friends, and it opens with them being called into the nursing home where the two grandfathers have gotten in trouble once again for switching out the decaf coffee with regular, which caused some issues with people's blood pressure medicine. But the two of them have this like similar relationship that or attraction that can't be denied, and their two grandparents or grandfathers scheme to set them up. So they end up in a fake relationship to try to get their grandparents off their back. It's set against, he runs a distillery and she runs a restaurant. So there's a lot of great food and beverage descriptions. It's set in a Chicago neighborhood undergoing gentrification. It's the first of a trilogy that will follow these scheming grandfathers as they plot to set up their grandchildren and help them find true love. So it's really, really fun rom-com. And then onto some nonfiction. We have a couple of books that will actually like take you to different locales. Walking the Invisible is by Michael Stewart. He wrote, he's obsessed with the Brontes. He wrote, he always wondered what happened to Heathcliff when he disappeared and wondered about his backstory. So he actually wrote a novel called Ill Will, which told Heathcliff's story in full, which won the Not the Booker Prize. He also commissioned 4 Bronte stones, which you can see if you travel to the area where the Brontes grew up, and each is inscribed by a quote from contemporary poets and authors. So this book takes you through the lives of the Brontes, the daughters, the son Bramwell, and the father, but also the landscape that inspired them. So this is kind of like a combination of nature writing, literary criticism, and memoir. And it actually ends with several of these hikes that you can do yourself, with descriptions of the routes and lots of maps. So it is like literally armchair travel. And then All Signs Point to Paris. This one sounds like a novel, but it's actually a true story. It's about a woman who is dealing with the death of her father, as well as a bad breakup. And she goes to a psychic for help. And she is told by the psychic that the ex-boyfriend that she can't stop thinking about was the one. Because all of the stars point to her soulmate being born in France, in Paris, on the same day as her ex. And she refuses to believe that he was the one, so decides that there must have been other men born on that day in Paris, and decides to find them. So she travels to Paris, and she narrows the list down to a potential list of 16 men. So this is a fun romantic memoir, perfect for those who enjoyed Eat, Pray, Love or Under the Tuscan Sun. This is very funny, but also very emotional, and you get a great sense of Paris, and also that great horoscope aspect as well. So it sounds like it would make a great TV show. So I believe it's one that they're shopping around. And then speaking up, I think the last book is Downton Shabby. So who hasn't dreamt of, after watching Downton Abbey, living in one of those big giant manor homes in England? So Hopwood Dupree has a fancy sounding name, and he was always embarrassed of that name growing up. He actually called himself Todd, which is his middle name, for most of his life. But when he moved to Hollywood and became an actor and director, he actually decided to embrace that name. And his grandfather had always told him that Hopwood was their family name, and that they had a castle back in England, but they had come over in the 1700s to as a family to the US. They had founded a town on the East Coast, and he always kind of brushed off the fact that they had a castle back home as his grandfather's dreams. But he was on an ancestry site, and it led him to the discovery that there is an actual Hopwood Hall outside of Manchester. And on a family trip, he decided that to go for a tour there. And it had such history. Parts of the house were built in the year 1000. And there's a fireplace that they ended up with from Lord Byron's house. There's so much history. And but the problem with this manor house is that it was falling into disrepair. It had been abandoned after the last of the Hopwoods, the British side, died off during World War II, and along with a lot of the household World War I, sorry, along with a lot of the household servants, and they couldn't manage it anymore. Most recently in the 60s, it was a training school for monks who also had a nightclub there. So it was in various stages of disrepair, and he decided that he was going to use his connections to try to restore his family home. So it's a little bit DIY, so a little bit HGTV, and a little bit Downton Abbey. And if you're inside your head, you're thinking this sounds like an amazing reality show, you are not alone. They have there's a tentative deal for an unscripted series tentatively called Hopwood's Castle that they're pitching around to Netflix and other streamers right now. So really interesting mix of historical and really great for armchair historians and Anglophiles. And I think that's it. There's lots of digital copies of our books on Edelweiss or Catalyst, so or please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or would like a print copy of anything. Thanks.
Thanks, Rosalyn. I'm Tim Gain from Canadian Manda, and I'm going to start with a handful of fiction titles from our winter and early spring lists, the first of which is To Italy with Love, which is the latest escapist romance from popular author Nikki Pellegrino. It's a story of two women who have both given up on love, or at least they thought they have. One is an Italian woman named Assunta who runs a restaurant in a romantic, idyllic mountain town, and the other is Sarah Jane, a Brit on a road trip through Italy after splitting with her celebrity boyfriend. And Sarah Jane's car breaks down in said mountain village, so she has to stay there longer than she planned and will have experiences she did not expect. Then that's followed by The Tuscan Secrets. This is an extensively researched World War II historical novel that's partially based on the author's own family history. The main character is a woman named Anna, and when her mother dies, Anna inherits her mother's diaries. While reading them, she uncovers a mystery about her mother's past that lead her to her nonna's home in Italy, where she'll try to determine what happened to her mother during the war, when her mother was a member of the resistance and experienced a betrayal that caused her to flee. The next up is As Seen on TV. So this one I thought would be fun to include, as it's actually a send-up of a Hallmark style rom-com about a big city girl temporarily in this quaint small town who finds love. So this is about a New York journalist, Adina, who moves to a small town. She expects when she gets there that it's going to be quaint and charming and that she'll find unexpected love. But this town turns out to be much less Hallmark than Adina hoped it would be. She thinks she has finally found her chance to break into a big-time news world when a real estate magnate targets the town for redevelopment. But there's a snag. He's super hot, because of course he is. Then the next couple of titles are new epic fantasy series starts that I thought I'd include. There are two titles from Orbit that they've launched recently that have received really stellar reviews. They're both very well written, and I've included them because they feature fantastic world building that will allow you to escape from reality. So the first of which is Age of Ash. So this is from Daniel Abraham, who is one of the co-authors of the best-selling Expanse series, which is the basis for the hit television series. And so Age of Ash takes place over the course of 1 year, set in a single city, where there's a series of momentous events, but they are told from the perspectives of various characters who live in this city. And then The Justice of Kings. So this is a debut that, on top of having really brilliant world building, also has really great character development. It's a mix of action, intrigue, and magic, with a main character who is the most feared justice in the kingdom, who upholds the law with a sharp mind, master swordsmanship, and magic. And his latest investigation is into the murder of a provincial aristocrat that will lead to unearthing a conspiracy that reaches to the very top levels of power within the kingdom. And then the final fiction title on the list is Antoinette's Sister. This is Diana Giovinazzo's follow-up to her debut, The Woman in Red, that was also very well reviewed. This is a well-researched, fictionalized version of the life of Marie Antoinette's beloved sister, Charlotte, who, while the French Revolution was raging, was hundreds of miles away in Naples, but was fighting desperately to secure her release from revolutionaries who could take her life. She was completely unaware that her sister's execution would change the course of history and would bring about the end of Charlotte's own empire as well. Then moving into nonfiction, First book on the list is Rooms of Their Own. So by now I know we're all sick of our own rooms. So I thought this is a delightful journey into the rooms of others, specifically the unique spaces in which famous writers created their most notable works. It has wonderful watercolor illustrations and includes Dickens, the Bronte sisters, Jane Austen, Agatha Christie, James Baldwin, our own Margaret Atwood, and several other authors as well. Then this is a book for people who love birds. This is exactly what the title suggests. It's a charming look at the world of birding, which has become much more popular during the pandemic and is an accessible introduction to birding, full of bird watching basics, fun facts, and illustrated species profiles. Then The Rooted Life. This book is a practical gardening guide for spaces both small and large, urban and rural, that has recipes and the mindfulness benefits of growing your own fruits and veggies and using them in your cooking, and also to make your own cosmetics and home remedies. The author, Justin Rhodes, has over 800,000 YouTube subscribers and over 6 million views a month. Then next up is Adventures in Nature. This is a simple and nicely illustrated season by season guide for families on how to reconnect with nature that includes stories and simple activities for every single month of the year. Then The Secret World of Stargazing is next. So amateur astronomy is another hobby that has had a big resurgence during the pandemic. And so this book is a season by season guide that shows readers exactly what they can spot in the night sky throughout the year, and how, while doing so, can switch off their busy minds, sit still in nature, and pay attention to the small details that make up the bigger picture of our lives. Then next up is The Forest Feast Road Trip. This book is a lovely combination of armchair travel and cooking. It's the author's record of an extended road trip around California, staying in unique dwellings along the way, and it shows readers the beauty and incredible food of the state, and has fantastic photography and also whimsical watercolor illustrations. Then next up is Color In and Out of the Garden. This book is full of inspirational advice on how to observe colors in nature and gardens, and then how to combine and use them while painting watercolors. Unfortunately, the only sample spreads we have are really about sort of drawing from the specific colors, but there is a very extensive section on how to observe colors in nature and the wellness benefits of those, even if you aren't necessarily a watercolor painter. Then that is followed by Diamonds and Deadlines. So this book is perfect for fans of the hit HBO series The Gilded Age. It's the heavily researched and lively biography of a woman who's mostly been forgotten to history. Tells the life story of a glamorous and scandalous woman in some people's perspectives, a woman named Miriam Leslie, who, rather than just sitting in her parlor taking tea and entertaining visitors, for 20 years ran what at the time was America's largest publishing company, Frank Leslie Publishing. So a very interesting, lively story of a pioneering woman. Then next up is Into the Forest. So this book is classic National Geographic treatment, a heavily photographic book of both science and inspiration. Trees will be the focus of Nat Geo's Earth Day 2022 magazine issue and their environmental campaign. Then next up is Let's Wildflower the World. This book I thought is really cool. It's a guide to guerrilla gardening, what's called seed bombing and seed swapping. So the book explains how we can fill the world around us with beautiful wildflowers, not just in our own spaces, but in our communities and cities and towns. But then also, while we're doing so, why we should care about plant heritage and about rewilding spaces. Then that's followed by Adventures at Home. This book has over 40 inspirational ways to plan fun-filled family times into busy daily lives without spending much money, or in most cases, even leaving your home or backyard. The book includes activities such as creating time capsules, recording childhood memories, spending 24 hours without any electricity, stargazing, and many more. And then that is followed by How to Survive Family Holidays. So the author of this book, Jack Whitehall, is one of the UK's top comics, TV writers, and actors. He has had 3 very popular Netflix stand-up specials, as well as very popular TV shows, Travels with My Father, Bad Education, and Fresh Meat. I would highly recommend Travels with My Father, in which he travels around the world with his very stuffy, curmudgeon-y, septuagenarian father, who's very reluctant to, in a lot of cases, even wear shorts or take off his shoes. So this book is sort of 1 part travel guide, 1 part family tell-all memoir, and so it's a hilarious mix of sort of family stories and a travel survival guide. And then the final book on my list, Wild Kilted Yoga. This I had actually basically forgotten was on our list. And when I was going back through to choose titles, I couldn't help include this one, even though it's fairly ridiculous. It's a combination of armchair travel to the Scottish Highlands and a yoga wellness book. And so that is the end of my list. Thanks again for joining us. And now Laureen is up next.
Hi, everybody. It's Laureen Cusack speaking, and I'm going to be presenting the books about adult escapism from the Ampersand group. First up is Growing Old, Going Cold. Every year, we hear of stories in the news about people who welcome in the new year by jumping into Lake Ontario or somewhere else across the country. In fact, there are people who belong to cold water swimming clubs around the world who start their day with a quick cold water swim year-round. One such person is Kathleen McDonnell, who lives on Toronto Island and takes a daily dip into the lake regardless of the water temperature. And Kathleen explains braving the water is her superpower. In this memoir, Kathleen shares her love of cold water swimming, the health benefits, and the numerous life lessons she's learned from a slow and steady commitment to the waves. The Creative Instigator's Handbook. This art book is one of those big idea books that inspires the crafty person to consider creating art pieces or projects with a message, and that means activism. It's for someone who is creative and has an interest in changing the world around you. The book will showcase art installations from around the world, including interviews with the artist by Leanne Prain. And some of the projects are simple and others are larger than life structures. The pieces were created by a single person and others by a collaboration of people. They include something as easy as a poster sign or cross-stitching, a wall mural, and even a fence with knotted hearts. Bigger projects include the Street Piano Project, the Neighborhood Little Free Libraries, a quilt project, and the Red Dress Awareness Campaign. So like I said, this is a very inspirational art book. Next up is the Vertical Veg Garden to Container Gardening guide. So this urban gardener specializes in vertical container gardening and offers a thoroughly researched guide with best practices that he's found over the past 10 years. He will explain how you can make the most of walls, balconies, patios, arches, and even windowsills using all kinds of containers in small spaces. He covers how to grow fruits, vegetables, and herbs. And the book includes how to draw up a year-round planning calendar, planting projects for beginners, compost ideas, and a lot more. So this is a hefty paperback gardening book with full color photos and illustrations throughout. What I liked about this next book was its terrific storytelling. Return to Solitude is the long-awaited sequel to Adventures in Solitude by Grant Lawrence, a CBC radio host over in Vancouver. It's a collection of 12 new stories about Lawrence's time spent at his family cabin in Desolation Sound up the Sunshine Coast of BC. He takes a laid-back approach, describing his colorful neighbors and friends who settled in the area many years ago. Lawrence reminisces about the people and happenings over the past 10 to 12 years, like summer holidays, family hikes, boat rides with his wife, singer Jill Barber, and their 2 young children, family birthday parties, whale and dolphin sightings, and rescuing swimmers from dark and murky waters. This nonfiction entry is a very relaxing armchair read. The Book of Nature Connection. I really like the sound of this book. The author wants you to become a nature sommelier. This book is designed for families to unplug from technology and reconnect to nature. There are 70 diverse and easy to follow activities, games, and crafts that are all educational, fun, and they're meant to promote mindfulness and a renewed connection to nature. There's 60 full color photos, maps, charts, and graphics throughout. And Dr. Rodenberg is the executive director of Camp Kawartha in Peterborough. Heiress is an interesting biography about the lives of young women with considerable fortune who partnered with a man of status. And these women were mostly innocent and vulnerable, and many were preyed upon, while others had their targets set on someone. The book begins in 1665 England, when marriages were arranged between families to secure land and power. And the author covers a vast number of women throughout history. At times, there's a little bit too much detailed information. It's quite overwhelming. You almost need a whiteboard with an ancestry tree of who's who, but it is fascinating to see how marriages were made to forge either a dynasty or they were forged for love, but mostly it was all about the money. And it was during New York City's Gilded Years when the business of aristocratic marriages really exploded. Women from old money and new money wanted a British title. People like the Vanderbilts and the Astors, Morgans, Whitneys, and even Winston Churchill's mother, Jenny Jerome. So if you're a big fan of history, readers will enjoy all the name dropping and gossip in this book. A fabulous escapism book is Start Without Me. So the word that comes to mind to describe this book is hilarious. Gary Janetti is an actor, writer, and TV producer. And it's a collection of his stories about growing up in Queens, New York in the 1960s through the 1980s. The stories are both touching and heartbreaking at times. And Gary's a really unusual kid in that he prefers to watch TV in his basement during his summer holidays. He plans his screening time around checking off the TV guide listings of his favorite television shows like The Carol Burnett Show and One Day at a Time, Alice, Happy Days, and even Charlie's Angels. So Gary loves everything about movies, television shows, and even Broadway. His references and comments about the entertaining industry and gay culture is so funny. He'll have you laughing out loud. Embroidery is a terrific escapism book, and this is a trending craft. Aruna Kunaraj is a Toronto artist who will explain why you should pick up a needle and thread and get sewing. Aruna specializes in decorative needlework. She's chosen 20 botanical-inspired projects. These projects are accessible for all sewing levels and skills with clear, full-color, step-by-step instructions. And she'll explain the core techniques and then show you how to put them to practice. For all you people planning holidays and trips, Lonely Planet and their fabulous travel guidebooks are back in business after a long hiatus due to COVID. So if you want to travel again, pick up this new 6th edition. It's been revised and updated, and it's one of the most beautiful destinations in Canada. And now something completely different is A Tree a Day. Consider starting your day with a tree meditation. This inspiring book is a gentle reminder to pause each day and appreciate the natural world. There are 365 bite-sized entries that include a seasonal quote, a fact, a line of poetry, maybe a reference to folklore or a story about trees from around the world. and each tree is illustrated with a unique work of art, from either a classical painting to a breathtaking photograph. I just love the music of this age. Be My Baby by Ronnie Spector. So if you're a baby boomer, you should know who Ronnie Spector is. But if you don't recognize her name, she was the lead singer of the girl group, the Ronettes. Now, this memoir has been newly updated from 1990, and it's been repositioned as a Me Too story. It also has a new foreword by Keith Richards and 2 8-page photo inserts. Ronnie was born Veronica Bennett, and she formed a group with her sister Estelle and cousin Nedra. And in 1963, the Ronettes collaborated with record producer Phil Spector. The group shot to fame with the hit song Be My Baby, followed by Baby I Love You, Walkin' in the Rain, and the Christmas favorite Sleigh Ride. Ronnie takes the reader on a behind-the-scenes tour of the 1960s music industry and her tumultuous marriage to Phil Spector. Sadly, Ronnie Spector died in January of this year at the age of 78, but there is a movie coming out in 2023 about her life starring Zendaya. And my last book is Natural Tables, my mistake. So if you're a fan of Martha Stewart or Joanna Gaines, you might want to look at this stunning tablescape book for any occasion. It's filled with 15 table settings in full color photographs inspired by the great outdoors. The author shares her eclectic styling tips that are simple to follow, like creating a theme. It can be a weekend brunch, a festive cocktail hour, or a seasonal holiday gathering. Other tips include choosing a color palette, selecting the right linens, the tableware you'll need, candles, flowers, and recipes, of course. This book arrives in time for Easter and the summer season. So now I'll pass you back to Sherry. Oops, over to Andrea, my mistake.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Andrea Colquhoun from Penguin Random House, and I'm starting with the adult fiction. So When I'm Gone, Look for Me in the East by Quan Berry. The story of a novice Buddhist monk in Mongolia who is asked to join the search of finding the next reincarnation of a great Lama, along with 2 other monks, a Buddhist nun, and his twin brother, who has left the order after years in the monastery as a child recognized as a reincarnation himself. On this quest, the brothers Mun and Shulin spar over the right way to live, making this an examination to the meaning of life well lived and the Buddhist way. This is a journey full of doubt and questions and dharma, giving lots of background of Mongolia and maybe even enlightenment. The next book is Sedating Elaine by Dawn Winter, a Black comedy starring Frances, a small, quiet girl who has worked washing dishes in a UK restaurant for the last 10 years. She owns her flat, but doesn't have any money, and is in debt to her dealer for £2,000. She was pining over her ex-girlfriend Adrian when she meets Elaine in a bar. Elaine ends up in Frances's bed and never leaves. Now, Frances is feeling pressure from her dealer, so she comes up with the idea to ask Elaine to officially move in, hopefully to help pay her debt. But Elaine takes this as love instead of rent due and becomes even more sex-crazed and needy. Frances then comes up with another harebrained idea. She decides to tranquilize her voraciously amorous girlfriend for a few days so that she may pay off her drug dealer, make soup, and finally get some peace and quiet. Blood Sugar by Sasha Rothschild. This is a debut fiction about a very likable, down-to-earth murderer being accused of the one crime she did not commit. Ruby has killed 3 times, but she is not a sociopath. She is an animal-loving therapist with a thriving practice. But then she is accused of killing her husband, Jason. This is the one that she didn't actually commit. So with the help of an old friend, Ruby now has to prove her innocence. My next book is Such Big Dreams by Rima Patel. a Canadian debut author with great book club potential. This is an immersive and transportive read about a classic underdog character. Vaki grew up on her own on the streets of Mumbai. Now she is working as an office assistant and trying to forget her childhood. She feels completely invisible with the people she works with until Alex from Canada comes to work as an intern for 6 months on his way to Harvard. He wants to know everything about Mumbai, and he wants Vaki to show him. He also really wants to know who Vaki is, not the person she wants people to see, but who she is. And he has a way of asking questions that she cannot resist. Through her friendship with Alex, she starts to see herself in a new light, the person she can become, if she only takes the chance. Marrying the Ketchups by Jennifer Close. A comedy about 3 generations of one Chicago family, all within the background of their family restaurant. Set in 2016 over 3 months, where everything the Sullivans know to be true turns upside down. Cousins Teddy, Gretchen, and Jane alternate perspectives on their not quite midlife crises in Chicago, as Trump wins the election and the Cubs finally win the World Series, just weeks after their biggest fan, Bud Sullivan, passes away. His restaurant is the center of most of the action as Teddy struggles with an affair with his recently not engaged boyfriend. Gretchen is forced to leave her band, pondering her failed experiment with adulthood. And Jane uses a cheating husband to examine what she wants in life. Hint, it turns out not to be him. How can any of them be expected to make the right decisions when the world feels sideways? This is a fun read about a family trying to figure out how to keep going in a world that seems to be falling apart. When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. She has written young adult before, but this is her first adult and a great book club pick. This is a feminist tale set in the 50s, where all at once, a lot of females transformed into dragons. Written in a documentary style, Alex Green is a young girl when this event takes place, and her home life changed, with her aunt being one of those dragons. Now, Alex and her young charge Beatrice, who is becoming obsessed with the forbidden, looks at the struggle she sees with the repercussions of women growing wings and taking to the skies, and the just as damaging ramifications of daring to be different in the 1950s, losing loved ones, gaining responsibility, and longing for something more. This book explores what happens when women take up the space they deserve, fight back against what is expected. A story about the changes we go through to become ourselves, talking about uncomfortable things, and accepting ourselves and those around us as they are. My next book is What We Both Know by Fawn Parker. A Canadian author, this book is about Hillary. She is the prime caretaker for her father. Once a celebrated author and public figure, he is now losing his memory and his ability to write. Hillary ends up agreeing to ghostwrite his memoir. But when diving into her father's past, and in turn, her own, a horrifying truth begins to piece itself together. Will she preserve his legacy? Or will she write the truth? How will telling the truth affect her own budding career? No matter what her choice is, Hillary has to deal with the pain that writing the memoir has resurfaced. This is a smart feminist novel about childhood trauma and sexual violence. Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. In this debut novel, Piercy's parents have a summer cottage in Barry's Bay, Ontario. She meets the boy next door, Sam, and they become inseparable every summer. Until one summer when Piercy and Sam suddenly stopped talking. What happened that summer, and why haven't they kept in touch? Piercy is now headed back to Barry's Bay for Sam's mother's funeral. When Sam and Percy move on from whatever tore them apart, will they move on from whatever tore them apart? This is told over the course of 6 years and one weekend, with alternating timelines of now and then. This book is a look at love and the people and choices that mark us forever. Something a little bit different. This is a Strange Light title called The Red Arrow by William Brewer, a debut author. On a train going from Rome to Bologna and back, travels a young failed writer who has been a failed painter and risks being a failed husband, and whom depression has brought him to the brink of suicide several times. He is looking for the mysterious physicist he is ghostwriting for to pay his debts. The writer, now cured of his depression with the help of an experimental psychoactive drug treatment, weaves a web between past and present, talking about the profound nature of time and how it affects people's relationships, about life, death, depression, and love. With an unreliable narrator who admits he himself cannot distinguish his own memories from those of the physicist, the novel weaves together the two men so thoroughly. Once they finally come together, it all fits. The mysterious treatment looming on every page is, of course, not a mystery at all. It wonderfully ties back to the beginning and into the physicist's tale as well, further blending the two individuals into one mass of memory. My next book is Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Myrow. This is the first of a new trilogy by the well-known Canadian author, Stephen Price. Very different book for him, I will admit. In 1882 London, two children with unexplained powers, what they call talents, the self-healing Charlie and founding Marlowe, who can mend damaged flesh or melt it, are found and escorted to the Carndale Institute in Scotland by two detectives. The school is where the guardian stands between this world and the world of the dead. But the guardian is dying and they need a new one. In fact, something has already slipped past the guardian, and one of the other detectives have broken away and is now looking for the children, specifically Marlowe. But he's not good anymore, just to mention. With the help of Mrs. Harrogate in London, will the adults be able to stop the rift between worlds and stop the bad guys from getting Marlowe before it is too late? This book doesn't leave you on a cliffhanger, but does kind of make it hard to wait for the next book. I, for one, want to know what happens next. I need to find out what happens to Marlowe. This is the first of a trilogy, and it is 600 to 800 pages long and well worth every single page. The next book, for something a little bit lighter, is A Smart Rom-Com, Thank You Next by Andy J. Christopher. I decided to read this because I loved the premise of this. Alex is a divorce attorney who has never really connected with anyone she has dated. She doesn't really know why, but it is starting to be an issue for her. So she decides to get to the root of the problem. She will interview her exes to discover what went wrong. When her friends learn about her great idea, a group of them decide to tag along. Through the process, Alex starts to realize that the reason she didn't connect with any of them might have a lot to do with Will, an up-and-coming chef that is in the same friend group, but they have never really gotten along until now. The next book is Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. The author has written young adult in the past. This is her first adult book and the first in a new trilogy. This is about 4 young female friends who took the oath to join Her Majesty's Royal Coven, established by Queen Elizabeth I as a covert government department. Now, as adults, Helena is the only one left and is working as the reigning high priestess. The others have gone off to other pursuits. When a young trans witch is found, she's assumed to be a warlock and captured by the coven. That witch is haunted by a vision of the future that spells doom for all witches and the rise of demons, and is looking for help. Helena doesn't know how to deal with her and asks her friends to help. Then Helena finds out Theo is trans and wants to be inducted as a witch. She refuses and is determined to dispose of Theo by any means necessary. Helena's actions affect not only her group of friends, but the whole witch community. This book explores the big topics concerning women today: gender, feminism, the patriarchy, and the corrupting nature of power, in an explosive conversation-starting novel that is sharp, funny, provocative, and joyous. But most of all, this is the story of female friendship. So I'm going to nonfiction for my last two books, with the first one being, this is not a book about Benedict Cumberbatch by Tabitha Carvan. Before I talk about this book, I want to make one thing clear. I have zero interest in Benedict Cumberbatch. I know who he is, could tell you that he was in Sherlock, and that would be it. But this book is not really about Benedict Cumberbatch. It is about one woman's obsession with him. It is part memoir, part self-help, but at the base of it, about the power of reclaiming your passions, about motherhood and getting older and losing yourself and just giving yourself the acceptance of finding something you love that has nothing to do with being productive or with your family, and just feeling the joy of something. I love the message of never too old, never too weird, and never too late. She explores these themes through the lens of fandom, deep diving into every facet of what it means to be a fan, a groupie, an obsessed person, and really of just finding your joy. And my last book for today is How to Take Over the World by Ryan North, a Canadian author. The book's a fun and funny deep dive into science and technology and history, all viewed through the lens of, wait, what if you really did want to pull off classic supervillain schemes here in the real world? What do you actually need to build a floating base? And what kind of research is needed to clone dinosaurs to ride around on? What sort of technology lets you dig to the Earth's core to hold it hostage? And while we're at it, how close are we to curing death and living forever anyway? This is an introduction to the science of comic book supervillainy, a fun and informative explanation of the technology behind taking over the world, with illustrations throughout, with helpful diagrams and fun comics. And with that, I'll pass you back over to White Hots. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. So thanks everybody for joining us today. We hope you guys had fun with the presentation. Thanks again to Dewey Divas. You guys are amazing. If you haven't registered for Wednesday's webinar event yet, there is still time to do so. Thanks again to Dewey's Divas and Dudes for putting this together. We will be sending out another follow-up email just after we end this with links to the PDF and the hot list. A recording of this event will be made available to all registrants. Thanks again for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.